Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. It's obviously Seminar 2 with Ingrid Roche, who is from the National Allergens Association as well. So today we're talking about best practices in action, real-life allergen management. So this is a good opportunity to ask lots of questions and have a stimulating conversation. But in the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. So, good afternoon, everybody, and I'm going to hand straight over to Ingrid today. So, Ingrid, thank you for joining us.
All right, thanks, Karen. So today I'm just going to share my screen. It's happened, so. What am I sharing?
Okay. One second, Ingrid.
Sorry. Hang on. Today I'm going to talk about the practical side of food allergen management, as soon as I can get my screen to share. But what I would like is for anyone who's participating in the webinar to pop your burning questions or any problems that you currently have about food allergen management in the chat box, so that we can answer your questions as we go. And I'll get Karen to keep an eye on those so that we can stop and answer some of those things along the way. Okay, that looks like it's sharing properly now. All right. Yeah. So last week we talked about what the allergens are. So sesame, wheat, all of the tree nuts, milk, peanut, fish, egg, crustacea or shellfish, soy, lupin and mollusk. And these are the ones that are the most common ones. But as we said, people could be allergic to any food at all. Next week, we're going to focus more on the legal side of food allergen management in food service, and what the customer's legal obligations are and what your legal obligations are as a food service business. But today is very much about the real life kind of things that we can do in our food service. So we're going to talk about how we can help customers when they walk through the door and they have a food allergy and they'd like to eat with us. So just a reminder that if you have a food allergy, you have to completely avoid the food. So that means that we need to know what ingredients are in the food that the customer can't have. So knowing what's in your food is really important. And a reminder that reactions can happen to really, really small amounts. So a drop or a crumb of food can cause a severe reaction in really sensitive people. And it can cause mild reactions in people who are less sensitive, which is still bothersome for them and can create quite a lot of distress. So that means that we need to be careful of cross-contamination as well. And a reminder, of course, that reactions can be life-threatening, and this is why we are, concerned about this as, people representing food businesses, health professionals, and people who live with food allergy. Now, just remember that in saying this about cross-contamination, most of the deaths, in fact, I think all of the deaths that have happened in food service with people eating out with food allergy, those fatalities have occurred because they've actually been given the food that they're allergic to as an ingredient in the food. And cross-contamination is important, and it can still cause severe reactions and it can still cause fatalities, but most of the time it's actually because an ingredient has been given to the person that they're allergic to. And so getting that bit right is really, really important. And then dealing with all the cross-contamination issue after that is also important. But it's just, I think it's important to focus on both and sometimes we give more precedence, you know, to the cross-contamination, whereas actually we need to make sure that exactly what is in our ingredients and our food is what we're telling the people who are eating with us. Now, everything that I'm going through today is in All About Allergens booklet, which you can download. So you can even do that now if you like. And all of the concepts that I'm going to be talking about are summarised in this booklet, which is a summary really of all of the concepts that are in the training courses that you can either do through us or with your food auditor. But these are available. There's lots of tools and resources available online.
So Ingrid, sorry, just for a sec, just before we continue on, we've got a couple of questions from our attendees today. From what I understand, the food business must comply with the customer's allergy request by law. Where does a food business stand if a customer has a request for a food intolerance or just for a dislike of the ingredient?
So this is where I want to talk about this next week in more detail, because we're actually going to have a guest on the show that is one of the regulators. So they'll be able to answer this in more detail. So if we can save that question for next week, but I'll give you a brief answer now. In terms of you are much more liable for giving the wrong food to someone with a customer with allergy if they react, because that be causing harm to that person. So legally you would be much more liable for that in terms of prosecution. As far as a dislike and an intolerance goes, so with a food intolerance, it depends on the severity of that, but really it comes back to consumer law, where you basically need to comply with the customer's request. But I think the legal ramifications of that is different to an actual food allergy where you can cause harm to the person. But I think we'll address that question specifically next week when we've got a regulator on who can give the exact answer that you need.
Perfect. Thank you, Ingrid.
So with best practice in food allergen management, as with all of your food safety in your food business, so I think really looking at whether, making allergen management part of your food safety culture in your food service, and whether you have procedures in place for communicating about food allergens, so customer to the kitchen and the serving staff. I'm going to go into all of these in more detail. Cleaning, and then planning your menu, ordering, receiving foods and ingredients, so knowing what's in your food and being able to understand allergen labelling and where to find allergens in food. Storage, how to store things safely, your food preparation techniques to minimise the risk of cross-contamination, and then serving food, so making sure the right food gets to the right person. So if you're not quite sure where you're at, you can do a quick check. We've got a checklist that you can download and look at some of your systems and processes and procedures just to see whether you can actually tick those off and whether you're doing some of those things. And then you can kind of use this as kind of a first quick assessment of where you're at, and then use the audit tool that I talked about last week to actually go through in a bit more detail about where you might be at in your food allergen management practices. So if we talk first about communication, I did talk about this a bit last week, but I really want to go into sort of some best practice concepts. So I guess the first thing that happens is the customer comes into the store, so legally you're only really liable for providing an appropriate meal to a customer with food allergy if they have told you about their allergy. So if they don't tell you about their allergy and you serve them their allergen, that's not actually your fault. But if they do tell you about their food allergy and you agree between the two of you to provide a meal, then that meal needs to be managed in such a way that it minimises the risk of that allergen being in the food that you give to the customer. So I guess it's always good practice, best practice to ask if customers have any food allergies, and certainly it's becoming more common to walk into a restaurant and the serving staff will ask the table whether they have a food allergy, which is wonderful to see because I don't think that was happening even 5 years ago. So then between the customer and the serving staff or the wait staff, and obviously there's lots of different names for these roles, then there needs to be a conversation about what might be appropriate on the menu, which means your serving staff need to know the allergy content of the meal, and I'll talk about how that information can be available in a minute. So the next bit of communication that happens is the serving staff then need to talk to the kitchen staff. So we need to get that information from the customer to the serving staff and to the kitchen staff. And I have lumped everyone into kitchen staff who's doing food preparation, because sometimes that's the serving staff as well. Sometimes it's a kitchen hand, sometimes it's a chef, and sometimes you just have all-rounders who are doing a bit of everything. So all of these processes will be different depending on the actual local little food service business. So some of the ways to get that information across. So when the order is taken and written down either by hand or electronically or printed off a till, off a menu ordering system, there needs to be some way of highlighting that meal is for someone with a food allergy. So that little image there, it's got the peanut allergy highlighted. So try and use a different colour. If you've got an electronic system, try and have some way that it's bolded or has some sort of colourful highlighting so that it's really obvious to the person providing the meal. And then just not relying completely on that written documentation, having a conversation or a verbal flag where the wait staff is talking to the kitchen staff or whoever's going to do that meal preparation, that this person has a food allergy. And of course there might be a bit of back and forth in here. So, the serving staff might talk to the kitchen staff to say, hey, this person's got an allergy. Are you able to make this meal without the allergy, or what's on the menu that would be suitable for them? The kitchen staff might then, go out and speak to the customer. So there's nothing wrong with the cook or the chef actually having a conversation with the customer as well, bearing in mind that it might be really, really busy at the time that you're trying to do this. So I am aware that restaurants and cafes and other food service environments are very, very busy, and it's not always possible to go and have a direct conversation with the customer. But if you've got these other processes in place, then it can work if your serving staff have those communication tools up their sleeve. So then, of course, there's communication within the kitchen as well, because you might have the serving staff talking to one food preparation staff member who then takes that information to whoever is actually going to prepare the meal. Or within the kitchen, you might have whoever's going to prepare the meal saying, okay, I'm preparing this meal. It's for someone with a prawn allergy, and you guys are cooking prawns over there. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to cook this meal so it's nowhere near you guys, and we're going to minimise the cross-contamination. So that's you using your different space, your different equipment, and making sure that the area that you're cooking it in has been cleared of that particular allergen. And then everyone else in the kitchen, if you have food allergen management as part of your food safety culture, then everyone knows not to encroach on that place or that space that person is cooking the allergy meal. So you've kind of got that quarantined, so they know not to go into that space while that meal is being prepared. So then the meal all gets done and it's ready to be served. So the kitchen staff then need to communicate with whoever's going to serve that meal and say, hey, this is that meal for that person with peanut allergy or milk allergy or egg allergy. This is what it is. Can you please take it out to them? And then the serving staff go out to the customer and confirm that they are the customer with the allergy. It's great. May not always work, but it is great if that person, if they're part of a group, if that meal can go out to the person with food allergy first, so that at least that minimises the risk then of them getting someone else's meal that hasn't been prepared with the food allergy in mind. So it may not have been prepared, other meals might not have been prepared with all of those cross-contamination prevention techniques that you use for food allergy. So that's just a way of making sure that the meals don't get mixed up. So that's sort of your flow of communication. And if that flow is working, then that helps keep the customer safe. So knowing what's in your food is this other part of communication that's really important for both the business and the customer to be able to make that risk assessment that the meal that is planned for that person is going to be safe. So the other communication tool that we talked about last time was using some signage at your front of house to say, please tell us about allergies, when you come in, and having a note on the menu to always ask about allergies. So we've got your wait staff who's saying, do you have any food allergies? And then an example might be, oh, I'm allergic to milk and peanut. Would the frittata be okay? Or, is what meal, do you think your chef can cook for me that is not going to have my allergies? And then best practice would be, oh, I'm not sure. Let me go check. So this is your wait staff either checking with the kitchen to see what would be appropriate, or you may have other tools in place, which is probably the job of either your food safety, of your food safety supervisor, which may be your manager or your cook or your front of house kind of manager as well. So there's lots of people within the business who have multiple jobs, and one of them might be the food safety person. So a menu matrix, so food allergen menu matrix, is one tool that you can have that helps with the communication, that first bit of communication from your wait staff to your customer to see what actual meals are on the menu that do or don't have particular allergens. So this is just an example of one. So basically, this is a tool where you can list all of your menu items down one side. So examples here, so Caesar salad, you've got different pasta salad, steak sandwich. So whatever might be on your menu goes down one side. And then all of the allergens are listed across the top. And then you can go through, and you might do this in different ways, whatever works for your food service. So in our example, we use a C for contains, which means that the Caesar salad contains milk, the pumpkin risotto contains milk, pasta salad, the steak sandwich, the chicken burger, etc. And then if it's a blank, then it means it doesn't have that allergen in there. Some people like to use a tick or a cross, but as long as everyone knows what the symbol is that you're using, that's fine. And then with the PAL, so PAL here is the precautionary allergen labelling. So there might be an ingredient or a product that's used in that meal that has one of those may contain statement in it. We'll talk a bit about those in a minute. But this is the tool. So really it's a communication tool so that the wait staff can identify what allergens are in the meal, so they can then communicate that to the customer, and the cooks and chefs can also have a look and do a double check that which meals have allergens in them and which don't. And this is a document, of course, that needs to be kept up to date depending on what brands and things and what brands of foods you're using and what your ingredients are of your different menu items.
So Ingrid, sorry. So with something like that, would that be something you'd hand to the customer, or is that something you'd put against every dish? Is there a way? I know that's the communication tool, but is there another? Would you give a physical copy to a customer?
I think it's really an internal document to refer to. It's really so that I call it a communication tool, but it's it's something that helps with the communication to the customer. So it's a resource that your wait staff can use to say to the customer, oh, well, that meal has milk in it. Let me go check with the chef to see if it can be made without milk, because it might have been pre-prepared, so you might not actually be able to make it on the spot without milk, but it is just that sort of quick check to see what meals might be appropriate for somebody. You wouldn't have it on display because you really want to that it's up to date, and once you actually start cooking that meal, you know, the cook or the chef will want to be checking all of the labels and everything again anyway, just to check that it's safe. So some of the other things that you can use to make sure that your information that you're giving to people is correct is using a standard recipe. So, you know, if waitstaff aren't sure, they can look up the recipes. Now, standardised recipes tend to be used more in places where the same food is cooked all the time, like hospitals, childcare, camps, things like that. If you've got a restaurant or a cafe where you don't change the menu much, you can use standard recipes. A standardised recipe is a recipe that everyone uses, and you always use the same ingredients. You always use the same brands, and then you can, the second page of it would have what allergens are in that meal, and you can then use that information to make your menu matrix. And then you can sort of, you know, make changes to your standard recipes. If you do that, then you need to update your menu matrix. So it looks complicated, but once you actually start to use it and get the hang of it, it's, you know, you can have sort of a bit of a maintenance system going on with your different meals and things. The thing, I guess, that chefs sometimes don't like is that you can't be creative with a standard recipe. But if you're, you know, if you've got a high volume and you don't change your recipes much, best practice is to use a standardised recipe. Sometimes you can fiddle with the quantities and things, but really you want your ingredients and your brands to be the same as much as possible, so that your allergen information is consistently the same from day to day. So one day when the spaghetti bolognese, you know, is dairy-free, the next day it's dairy-free, and the next day it's dairy-free. Whereas if you get a different chef who does something different, then you might have something that's, you know, added to the meal that doesn't give it the same allergen content anymore. Okay, so in order to have an understanding of what's in your food, you obviously need to understand food labels. So I'm going to do a short segment on label reading. And so these foods here, so your common food allergens, are the allergens that must be listed on food labels. So this is a legal requirement of all packaged foods in Australia. So the new labelling laws that came in this year mean that all foods that have a mandatory labelling requirement, so all of the different tree nuts, peanut, egg, milk, sesame, soy, mollusk, fish, crustacea, lupin, wheat, barley, oats and rye, they have to be shown in the ingredient list using their plain English name. So that is a change. So you used to just be able to say tree nuts and list the particular tree nut. You're only allowed to list the tree nuts individually now. You're not really allowed to use the term tree nut. And then the other new thing is that you have to list wheat, rye, barley and oats separately in the ingredients. You used to just be able to say cereals containing gluten. So that's a bit of a change. And then they've also separated out mollusk and crustacea, so they're separate now because some people are allergic to one and not the other. Now, these foods must also be shown in the summary statement. So the other new thing is that the ingredients must be in bold, so all of the allergens have to be bolded. So it actually makes it easier for people to find whether the allergen is in that food or not. There also has to be a summary statement. So the summary statement that sums up all of the allergens, so it contains egg, almond, milk, wheat, and gluten. That is now compulsory, so labels have to have it, which also makes it easier to find allergens on the label. That used to be a voluntary statement. So it's much more prescribed. Unfortunately, the may contain statements are still voluntary and they're still unregulated. So there's lots of them and there's lots of different names for them as well. Now with the labelling laws, so that new labelling with the plain English names and the bolding and the contained statements, this is in place from February of this year, but foods that were packaged before February can still be sold under the old labelling laws until February 2026. So this is products with a long shelf life. So powdered products, sunflowers, and generally processed foods. So anything with a long shelf life that was packaged before February 2024 can have some of the old hallmarks of labelling, including obscure names for allergens such as lactoperoxidase, which is a processing aid that contains milk. So in the old version there in the blue, you could just list lactoperoxidase and your job was done. But if you weren't a chemist, you would not necessarily know that that meant that milk was in there. And because there was no requirement for summary statements, there really, unless you had a science degree, you wouldn't really know that that was milk. So now it's much clearer. You have to write processing aid and milk in plain English so that people with a milk allergy and people serving people with a milk allergy will actually know that there's milk in the products. So you still need to know all of those obscure names. So if you come across a label that doesn't comply, that looks like it was packaged before the new labelling laws came into place, you can access all of the old, so all of the allergy information from Allergy and Anaphylaxis Australia. They've got allergen cards which show you where different allergens pop up unexpectedly and what all of the ingredient names could be. So, for example, egg can be listed as ovomucoid or ovomucin. We've got some labelling videos that you can watch on our website as well, and some additional information for if you need anything to do a deep dive into allergen labelling. But just so you're aware that it's still a bit tricky. Now, with your precautionary allergen labelling, so the term for this now is becoming PAL. So PAL statement just stands for precautionary allergen labelling, which is your warning statement. So may contain, may be present. And the purpose of these statements is to explain that a food product might be contaminated with an allergen, which could be a risk to a person with food allergy. It can happen during growing, transport, storing and making the food. So just like making food in a restaurant or a cafe, making food that you're going to package, there can be cross-contamination that occurs along the way. Now, traditionally, these statements have been ignored, but they are being applied more responsibly where there is actually a real risk. So it's really time to stop ignoring them. And the recommendation is not to use them for people with food allergy. In saying that, many products still have precautionary allergen labelling and they may not have undergone a risk assessment process. There is a big push from within the food manufacturing industry to actually use these statements responsibly, as in only use them if there is a real risk to the consumer. So we do need to start taking more notice of them. We do recommend that they're not blanketly used. So make things from scratch if you can. If you've got an ingredient that has it in there, if you have time, you can actually have a discussion with the customer if it's an essential ingredient of that meal and it has a precautionary allergen label in it. Then you can check with the customer and they can decide whether they're happy to have that added to their food or not. Bearing in mind that in a really busy moment, you're probably not going to have time to do that, but that is, we're talking best practice here and we can have some discussions about how that might actually work in real life. So just a note about receiving of goods. So if you can check products every time you order for allergen, if your food safety supervisor has time to do that, so that your allergy information is up to date, then try and check the allergen content of those labels whenever you can, or fairly frequently, because manufacturers can change products at any time without telling anyone. And if it's a food that's not labelled, for example, a load from a bakery, then ask for a product information form which lists the same allergen information as a food label, so that you can then have up-to-date information to give to your customers. So let's talk about what we actually do in the kitchen. So I've got that communication piece. We've got the knowing what's in your food by reading food labels and having a menu matrix. So let's talk about cross-contamination in the kitchen now. So here we talk about cleaning, storing, and then your food preparation techniques. So cleaning means soap. So sanitizer doesn't remove food proteins, and it's the food protein that people are reacting to. All foods have a little bit of protein in it, and that's what causes the allergic reaction. So we need soap or detergent to clean things properly and to get rid of residue on food and equipment. And then washing hands. So cannot emphasize enough about washing hands. They're a really good contaminator. Just like with germs, they're really good at carrying allergens from one meal or food item to another. So we need to wash hands before starting and between tasks. So with preparing a meal for someone with food allergy, you would wash your hands more than what you would wash your hands for if you're just thinking about microbes. So if you've got someone with, if you're making salads or something, and you're making some for people with food allergy, you might need to wash your hands more often, because food that is okay for one person may not be okay for another person. And so, you might do something with tomato, and then you might do something with capsicum. You wouldn't normally maybe wash your hands between those two things, but if you've got someone with a tomato allergy and then you go to handle capsicum, you're going to have to wash your hands. So it's not just the raw meat to cooked meat or cooked, other fresh foods that's the problem.
Sorry, Ingrid, would that also then count for your front of house staff that are carrying out the dishes, that they wash their hands, only bring out that one plate at a time and come back and get the others? You wouldn't carry 2 or 3.
No, it's better to carry one, and there's another section on that as well. And it is good practice to wash your hands if they've been handling food, and if their hands are contaminated with food, it's probably good to just wash your hands before you take that plate out, so that you're keeping that person safe. So with equipment, cleaning of equipment is important as well. Now, dishwashers are really great at removing food allergens. So most equipment can go through the dishwasher. Some equipment is really difficult to clean, so whisks and blenders and food processors and whatnot. So this type of equipment just needs to be checked really thoroughly when you're making something for someone with food allergy. And sometimes you just need to check things and rewash them before you make food for that person, if it's needed, if there's obvious residue on there. And then in some cases, like toasters, it's a pretty common one, you'll need a dedicated bit of equipment for your wheat-free or gluten-free foods, just because sometimes there is no way of keeping that particular allergen out of that piece of equipment. And similarly with these, like with your brat pans and your grill plates and things like that, you might just want to cook that meal for the person with food allergy in a separate frying pan, rather than the bulk area where you might do the bulk of your cooking. So other little traps are tea towels. So tea towels are great at cross-contaminating other foods and dishes. So if you're preparing a meal for someone with food allergy, we just recommend using paper towel for, wiping, if you're cleaning equipment in between, and for wiping your hands as well, try and use paper towel rather than a tea towel to do that. And then with gloves don't prevent cross-contamination of food allergens. So you need, again, you need to change them as often as you would wash your hands between tasks for food allergy meals. So that can be a little bit of a trap as well. I think sometimes if you're just have bare hands, you're more conscious of when food is actually on your hands. But if you've got a policy where you have to wear gloves in your kitchen, then just be really hyper aware of when you might be contaminating a meal for someone with food allergy, and just change the gloves more frequently. And the other thing about gloves is if you've got someone with a latex allergy, you need to use latex-free gloves for them. So storage. So on the left there, that it's an example of storing an easily spread allergen above other foods, whereas really we want it the other way around. So you want to store your high-risk foods on the bottom shelves and perhaps away from other foods, so that you're not contaminating foods with foods that are easily spread or easily spilt. And then on the right there, we've got an example of storing all of our dairy underneath things like juice and water, so that you're not going to contaminate things, and you can use those products for everyone with milk allergy as well, because the milk, their high risk allergen has been stored below the foods that don't have that allergens. And then the other thing about storage is to clean spills straight away. Labelling is really important. So this is an example of a dry store where it's quite hard to read the labels. You want them to be obvious, because you want people to be putting food back in the right place, and you want to make it as easy as possible for that system to be maintained. And then things in bags or food that is sort of easily damaged, you might want to put them in a sealed containers just to keep that allergen contained. So the example there is flour in a paper bag. And those sort of high risk things, try and keep away from your allergen foods for special allergy meals. So you wouldn't want to be keeping your wheat flour with your non-wheat flours and things like that, so that you can keep those products safe. So if we're going to preparing and cooking of foods, so it's a good idea to try and make sure that at least, or preferably, best practice is to have everyone trained in food allergen management. And when you get several food allergy meals at once, really just take a moment to prepare the order of your meal preparation, because what is safe for one person may not be safe for another. So you might get an order for someone with, a wheat allergy, someone with an egg allergy and someone with a peanut allergy. And the meal for the person with the peanut allergy might contain egg. So you can't really make those two meals together. So preparing the order that you do things in is really important. And then making sure that you have at least a clear space in the kitchen that you can clean, and just keep everyone else away, so that space isn't being encroached on. And if you have a staff member who can just focus on that meal, if you're focused on that one meal, then you're always thinking egg allergy, egg allergy, egg allergy. And you're less likely to make a mistake, because you're not trying to do, 5 things at once. Bearing in mind that there's staffing issues and it's going to be busy, so just planning the processes that you have to be able to help, keep those meals safe and appropriate. If you know someone's coming in, or if you're planning for an event and you have the dietaries ahead of time, then you can prepare those meals in advance, and that's a good way of keeping things safe. So we want separate equipment for different items. So basting brushes, separate for different items, so that you're not, contaminating food from one to the other. And then things like frying pans and tongs need to be separate. And then also the space. So in my opinion, that image there of the 2 frying pans, if you're trying to keep prawns out of one, it's probably a bit close. You've got to watch for splashes and spills. So really think about your space. You might use opposite ends of your hot plate to cook things on. With boards, so coloured boards are great, but they don't necessarily work for your obscure allergens. So you might have a particular colour that you use for all of your grains, If you get someone in who's got an allergy to a particular grain, then that grain board is not going to work unless you wash it thoroughly in between. There is a bit of a movement to using a purple board for food allergy, but you can't use that same purple board for every single food allergy, because if you use egg on it for a person with a peanut allergy, and then someone comes along with an egg allergy, you can't use the same board. So the message is just keep washing. And then check your labels every time you're cooking for someone with a food allergy, just to make sure that it is correct. Some high-risk situations. So toasted sandwich makers. So hang it up, wrap whatever you're cooking in oil so that you're not getting cross-contamination there from whatever was cooked on it before. Buffet situations are really high risk. It's a really good idea to make a separate meal for the person with allergy, or you may have, an allergy-specific buffet. But cross-contamination from dropping food from one to the other, from sharing utensils. So it's always a good idea to have these manned by a staff member and not allowing people to serve themselves, because I do find that customers are never as conscious as food service staff at just using the one spoon in the one dish and making sure that things aren't dripping from one to the other. So definitely man any kind of buffet and make sure that the allergy people are served first, or from their own buffet where you're actually managing the different allergens as well. And then the other high-risk situation is your coffee machines. So I think it's almost impossible to get cow's milk out of a steam wand completely. And so that risk should be discussed with the customer. You can have separate milks and all of that, but unless that steam wand is absolutely thoroughly cleaned, you can't really keep the allergen away completely. I think most people with food allergy would know that, but you do get people still ordering things. But the other thing is it can be a good idea just to recommend that they have a different type of drink. So a black coffee and add the milk after, or like a hot chocolate with whatever milk they can tolerate, where you can heat the milk up in a different way that's not on that coffee machine, unless you have a coffee machine that's specifically for particular milks, or a steam wand that's for particular milks. It's really hard to reduce that cross-contamination, even for people with like an almond allergy. If you're using the same steam wand for milk and almond milk, it's quite hard to completely clean that. So just to be aware of that high-risk situation. Right. And then don't forget that garnishes, oils and sauces and gravies are also ingredients of the food and should be included in your, allergy matrix or standard recipes, or that information that goes to the customer. And then cross-contamination also from deep fryers. So you really need fresh oil if you're cooking something, which is not easy either, or don't recommend the deep fried meals to people with food allergy if you know that the allergen's been into that oil. And then the right meal to the right person. So as Karen said, good idea to wash your hands before you actually take it out to the person. The chef and serving staff need to confirm the meal with each other and serve that customer with meal allergy first. You can use other identifiers as well, so that the serving staff remember that is the meal for the person with food allergy. So you can use a coloured flag or a different coloured plate or a different shaped plate to serve those meals to people with food allergy, just so that it's another kind of flag to remember that you need to be careful with this particular meal. So that's kind of a snapshot of all of the practical stuff that needs to happen to get those meals out safely. And this is all covered in the online training. That's sort of part of our suite of resources and all the resources that you can download. But as I said, you can get started now by just downloading the booklet and just having a flick through at some of those kind of tips and tricks that we've got in the All About Allergens booklet as a reminder, or sort of an instructive piece that you can kind of have in your kitchen to remind staff of what to do, and part of your sort of training package. So that's, I've kind of talked to you.
Thank you, Ingrid. That's been very insightful. And I suppose it's those little things. Being allergic to prawns myself, the amount of times I've gone out and I've had chips or something and found a prawn shell in there because it's come out of the deep fryer. So it is very important, this whole educational piece. I've had a few incidents of it myself. But I have to say the chat is very quiet today. There's not a lot and no questions at this point. That's unusual. But it is an important topic, and I know that our next seminar is on navigating the allergen regulations with all the compliance, etc., around, which I think will be another riveting session as well.
So we will have a special guest on for that one as well, just someone who's more on the auditing side and the regulatory side, so that there'll be a good opportunity to ask lots of questions about what your obligations are, and how to respond to customers.
Just been asked if we can share the booklet information again, so that people can quickly grab that. We will put the links up on the ACF website as well, along with the recording of this session today. Because the one from last week will also be up there. So that's helpful. So Ingrid, I know this is something that's very close to your heart. So thank you so much for spending the time with us today.
Thanks.
Paul said, thanks for a great afternoon. So he's about to grade 400 food safety assignments. So so this is great PD for him. So good to hear, Paul. I hope it doesn't take you too long. And
so
for us,
students to do the course.
And these are good resources to, as you've just said, Ingrid, to direct your students to also. It gives us all the latest information. So I think at that point it's 4:50. If there's no other questions for today, we'll call it. So thank you very much again, Ingrid. And I look forward to seeing everybody. What time are we on it again? September the 11th at 4 p.m., which is a Wednesday again. As next week we'll all be down in Fine Foods. Ingrid will be down there too in Melbourne. So I'll get to see you in person next week, Ingrid. So that'll be good. So thank you, everyone. Have a lovely afternoon.